my label that I wear, my badge, is comparative mythologist. And also, my studies of mythology go into what is called folklore and folk legend. And there's a difference between legend and mythology, or legend and fairy tale. But I look at all of these. So I take a deep interest in each country. And I go and I try to find the evidence of the pre-Christian indigenous culture of the country, because I am someone who believes that many of the problems in society today are due to globalism, internationalism, and consumerism. So the big corporations, such as those that belong to the World Economic Forum, there are 1,000, they don't want you to be a citizen of Brazil. They don't want you to be a resident of a particular place in Brazil or of a region of Brazil, North Coast, South Coast, interior. They want you to be a consumer, a global consumer, right? Yeah. So I believe that one way of fighting back against this is to remind people of their native origins, okay?
Interesting.
Now, so I've investigated that question in the Japanese, the Mexicans, Peruvians, the Finns, the Swedes, the Danes. I've looked at all of them, the Slavs of Russia, and I am deeply interested in the native mind and the native customs that preceded Christianity, right?
Yeah.
Like I said, one thing I always emphasize, and I object strongly, if people say that like France or Ireland or Spain is a Christian nation.
Mm-hmm.
They are not Christian nations. They are Christianized nations. And the difference that I give is the difference between raw milk and flavored milk, or homogenized and pasteurized milk. Now, it's known by some of my close friends that I am I'm a milkaholic.
Yeah.
I have addiction to milk, like some people have addiction to alcohol, right? And so I can tell you, I have had the pleasure of drinking raw milk. And it is not pasteurized, not homogenized. It's not chocolate, strawberry. And I want to see if we together can go back to the raw milk of what is called today the Brazilian nation. Yeah. Now, when was the nation of Brazil formed? That's one question. When was Christianity brought to Brazil for the first time? That's another question.
Mm-hmm.
Every member of the Brazilian society needs to know those two things.
Yeah.
And then we take those two things and we put them away. And we go and we say, well, what's behind all that?
Mm-hmm.
Who were the Brazilian people before Christianity and before they became a nation? So I'd like to talk with you about that. And to set up the conversation, I'd like to make an important point. Okay, this is called framing the conversation. Look at so-called America. There are the states of America, and then Christianity came to America at a certain point.
Okay.
But actually, if you go back and you look before that, you find that there was no America. There were tribes. And I've heard various estimates, but there were probably about at least 600 tribes. And among these tribes, and this is very important, there were language groups.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting to study these language groups because 100 tribes might belong to the same language group. So there's probably 10 major language groups. And if you went back in time to America before Columbus, before colonialism, and you talked to in the language of one of these tribes, they would not have a concept of America. No, of course not. They would only have a concept of their region, their territory. So when let's say we're going to talk about, and I know this is difficult because I tried to research it and I couldn't find very much, okay? But we're going to talk about the time when the boundaries of Brazil, of the country of Brazil, was a mosaic of tribes.
Yeah.
The inland tribes, the Amazonian tribes, tribes around Rio de Janeiro. Well, what were the names of these tribes? And what languages did they speak? And what were their customs, you see? I'm deeply curious in that. And I'm also very happy and grateful to talk to you about it because you certainly know a lot more about it than I do.
I know something. I know, but it's no, we don't have a lot of information like that so easily available in Brazil. It's not like you go to a bookstore and you find books about it. I happen to have here around somewhere here something like 10 books. One or two are very special. Two of them are very special because they talk about the one is about the Yanomami. It's one of the most famous tribes or indigenous. They don't like to say called tribes or Indians anymore. Now they are talking about indigenous peoples. So Yanomami is big here, and they still live their way of life. They are more restricted to Venezuela, in the extreme north of Brazil. And they are miserable, of course, because, you know, Venezuela, a bad country, badly managed country. That must be beautiful, but it's on the wrong hands for many years. And the most of the ethnies that we can find here in Brazil is the Tupi-Guarani, the Guarani, the Tamoios. They were predominant here in São Paulo seaside area. And according to what I remember, there were around 500 or 600 ethnic groups, linguistic groups, most of them dominated by Tupi and Guarani. You have these two major language groups here. But that's it. We don't have a lot of information. But certainly they were territorial. There was no idea of a nation, of course. And they were kind of very, very primitive. Oh, by the way, we are talking about the South. We're talking about the east side of the continent. The west side, you have the Inca, which was a great civilization, but the real indigenous people of the Peru, they are called Quechua. So the Quechua, they go from Peru to Ecuador, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
If you go down to Bolivia, which they are border countries, you find the Aymara, and you have the I forgot the other names. But anyway, nations, they were the people on the east, the people here in my area, they were very brutal. They were fighting each other all the time. And there are even one or two historical registers about cannibalism and shit like that. But it's a culture. They were big. They thrived here. They didn't have the diseases, and you know what they brought to the continent with Christianity. And basically, that's the information I have about it. Is it
okay? Right. So here's my comment on that. First of all, it's essential for people listening to us who are considered, well, you are Brazilians, you are Brazilian heritage. You know, what is your heritage in the long, long picture?
Mhm.
You know, I realize that there are many Europeans in Brazil.
Yeah.
I realize, for instance, that there are Germans who came and the Germans interbred with the native women. That must have produced some very beautiful specimens.
That's the south of Brazil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, there was the African migrants.
Yeah.
But I want to say it's essential to anyone listening to know this. The reason why it's so difficult to go back and even build a vague picture, even a sketch, is not by accident, my friends. It's because the knowledge and the memory of those native peoples have been destroyed.
Yeah.
And one of the primary aims of Christianity is to destroy the memory and heritage of the native peoples when they convert to Christianity. So it's no accident that there's a lack of evidence.
Yeah.
Right?
Have you seen the movie The Mission?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's brutal. That's
Yes.
what happened here. I have one book here I bought like thousands of years ago. It's about the foundation of Asuncion of Paraguay. And it was like a prostitute place, you know. It's a resting place for the colonizers. The name were Bandeirantes, the Bandeirantes. So it was like a whore place, a whorehouse, and a place to eat and, you know, and continue journey.
Right.
And everything that was done here was brutal. It's like just like what they did in Central America, you know, um, Bartolomeu de las Casas, and everything. It's the same modus operandi.
They've done it everywhere.
Yeah.
And I explain in my book, not in his image, what is the source of this genocidal program against indigenous people. Okay?
The syndrome,
So,
what's the name? I forgot now.
well, it's the salvationist.
Yeah.
You can say it's salvationist because why do they come into these native territories? Because they want to save them, but actually they destroy them.
Save from
You know?
what?
Yeah, save them from what?
They didn't have a soul to save, right? They were not save what? Yeah, that was wild. Syndrome perpetrator, victim perpetrator syndrome.
Yeah, the victim perpetrator syndrome. It's all explained in my book. So I'd like to focus on the word brutality. Now, people might be saying, well, look, John, haven't you heard the story about how Christian missionaries came? They went to all parts of the world, all of them, Africa, Russia, Scandinavia, right?
China.
And they converted the natives because the natives lived in tribes and they often fought with each other. You never hear about them cooperating with each other.
Yeah.
Why not? Did they cooperate with each other? Of course they did.
Of course
they traded, they interbred, they cooperated. You never hear stories about them cooperating with each other.
Yeah.
You hear one side of the story, right?
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, just to add to this, the Inca Empire, they call empire, but there is some historians that say that you shouldn't call the Inca Empire, you should call Inca Confederation, because they never invaded and destroyed the peoples. They came to them and say, hey, we have this culture, we can build roads, we can build aqueducts, and so what do you want to take part of it? Well, I don't know if what happened if they say no, but
yeah, right.
But there was, I think, a kind of exchange there. It was not like what they say. The ones who did this in Peru were the Spanish, not the Inca.
Yeah, the people who destroyed your native people and your memory of where the people who were born there for many generations. The ones who destroyed that will never tell you a true story. For instance, if you go and read about the Maya and the Aztec, if you read about the story of Cortez and his conquest of Mexico and the conquest of Pizarro's conquest of the Incas, and sort out, get the bad evidence out of the way and look at the actual evidence, well, they were all tribal areas, and they were a confederation of different people who interacted with each other. Yeah. So the trade routes, say from central Mexico, go all the way up to Alaska. There's a trail, and they traded with the North American Indians, and then they traded south with the Incas, and they kept their own territories, and they traded with each other. They fought, but that's not all they did. So you get a very biased picture. I'd like to address this issue of brutality. Getting back to what I was saying. So I always like to think about the objections to what I say, because I say some outrageous things.
Yes, you do.
I don't know if I can use the F word, how that translates into Portuguese, but I say some fucking outrageous things. And I realize that people will be triggered and they will say, oh, no, no, no. Okay. Brutality. Oh, haven't you heard, John, that the beautiful Christian missionaries came in with the message of love and salvation, and they saved these horrible natives from their brutal customs? Yeah, how many times have you heard that story?
Thousands.
Right? Thousands. Listen, the brutality and the scale of the brutality that has been committed in the name of Christianity is beyond any tribal brutality.
Yeah.
That's the point I want to make. And the second point I want to make, which to me is even more significant for the current situation. Those who have difficulty following my point here, and they might think, well, John, what's your implication? Are you implying that we should go back to tribal brutality? And that's better than the social and religious morals, right?
Mm-hmm. Of course not.
Of course it is. And that's where we're going.
Okay.
That is where we are going.
Okay.
It has to go there because you see, in the breakdown, the globalists, the Christians, the people who want to control the masses have created a program that contains the seeds of its own destruction because it's against nature and against human nature. And it's also against that innate sense of morality that you have here in your own conscience. And so it's inevitable that the change in the world now, for the better, will result in a phase where we will return to a kind of tribal warfare.
I see.
But the important point is that those who take responsibility for this know who the enemy is. It's not an opportunity. It's a fantastic and fabulous opportunity to reclaim humanity. But it's not the opportunity to engage in tribal warfare, like between the Jivaro and the Incas and Shipibo. No, it's tribal warfare against the global system. And that is what is the biggest danger to the global system, you see? So I answer that argument by saying, oh, are you proposing, violence? This is a subject we might talk about. Am I proposing violence against who? Look, you are the target of violence already. Don't you see that? Except that you are the target of violence by cowards. The heads of organizations, the government officials, the bureaucrats, the socialists, they are attacking you, your family. They are attacking your livelihood. And so, yeah, and so let's get real. You know, when I know that I am the target of violence, and someone actually wants to destroy my life and make it difficult for me to live in a normal way, honest, right? Then I perhaps need to start thinking about how to resist.
I see. Yeah. It makes sense. Well, the violence issue, brutality is one thing. You can come and, be brutal about a subject, tell the truth, or at least the point of view that we have, etc. But violence is another thing. Violence is something that people immediately, they, no, violence, no, I'm not, I wouldn't be violent. But I am sure that violence is not one of these, free, you just distribute violence because you are a terrible person. The violence of protection, the protective kind of violence. Violence is something unimaginable for Christians. So this tribal response, or this tribal uprising, should be done by a kind of people that doesn't have this kind of issue with violence. But but this is the point. When is violence acceptable?
Okay, this is a good question. I wonder if the listeners will appreciate that you and I are walking on the blade of a knife.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that, man. You came up with that. Okay, let's do it.
I don't want to put you at risk.
No, I'm not.
Who control the medium that we're using to talk with.
Yeah.
So let's see if I can be really careful about it.
Yeah.
And say a little more, and then I'd like to move on to another point about the native heritage of Brazil, okay?
All right.
Which is related, because it's related to capoeira.
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 Yeah, right. That's capoeira is lethal.
Yeah, we'll get to that. We'll get to that soon. So my point is, I said, and not in his image, I cited the Bible. And I said, well, some old men with beards living hundreds and hundreds of years ago claim to have written down the words of Jesus. And you find them in the red in the Bible. Do you have that in Portuguese too? It's in red.
In some editions, yes. Some editions, yes.
So what did he say? Well, one of the things he said was, resist not evil.
Yeah.
The words of Jesus, right? And so what I said, not in his image, is, well, maybe it's the perpetrators of evil who give you that advice.
I agree with you totally.
I mean, isn't it obvious?
If you don't defend yourself from predators, they will kill you. That's
right.
And they are predators. We're saying they, of course, we know who they are, but they are predators.
So that's a very strong point. And I make that point in my book. Just I'm appealing to you, common sense. I mean, be realistic. What kind of advice is resist not evil? And who wrote that advice? And why? And I can tell you, and I can explain why very simply. There's an expression in English. It's called the higher moral ground.
Mm-hmm.
So in an argument, in a situation, someone, it says, he took the higher moral ground, right? And that means that his action or her action was actually superior to the action against him. So, according to Christianity, if I go out with my girlfriend to the movies some night and we're walking home, my Brazilian girlfriend that I never had, but I did dream about her, okay? My Brazilian girlfriend and I walking home one night in Rio de Janeiro near the favelas, which are notorious in the world for being one of the most violent places in the world, right?
Definitely. Some favelas, some
Yeah,
favelas.
some favelas. And we get attacked by a gang of thugs, and I don't defend myself or my girlfriend. Why? Because I'm a better person than the attackers.
Yes.
And I take the high moral ground. I don't commit violence. I don't commit aggression against anyone. I ask you seriously, you're listening, sit back in your chairs, take a deep breath, and tell me if you can imagine any situation where that works out well.
Yeah. Someone touches my kids and I am a good person. I will not be on their level. That's how they say. Let's not get to their level.
Right.
And then you leave the perpetrators go away free, scot-free, scot-free. That's how they say. Huh?
So the point I'm making is that when you read the supposed words of Jesus, which says, resist not evil, what you're reading is an exemption clause. It's like in a legal document. The legal document says, so and so is responsible, blah, 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 except for this. That's an exemption clause. You're reading an exemption clause that gives the perpetrators and aggressors and enemies total freedom to do what they want to do without you resisting, but you have the higher moral ground. You're a better person.
Yeah.
Huh?
Because
I would,
you didn't your hand was clean from the
that's
blood.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. Yeah.
It's like, I would never, John, I would never punch anyone in the face
Yeah.
because I'm better than that. Well, you're not better than that. You're
That's
not.
this is a Hollywood message.
Yeah, it is. It's a Hollywood message.
Hollywood message. Yes, yes, yes.
So we're walking in dangerous territory here, my friend.
Yeah, sorry?
And we'll move away from this subject for a while, okay?
Yeah. Let's go back.
But before I do, I wonder if I can introduce myself for future purposes. I want to introduce myself to the Brazilian people in Brazilian.
What do you mean? In Brazilian.
In the language of Portuguese.
Okay. Now I got it.
Portuguese, excuse me, in the Portuguese language, which, by the way, is not the indigenous language of Brazil. It was
No?
brought in Portuguese.
Yeah.
So what, do you have any name for any language where you name them? You name, those are the language groups before
Yeah.
colonization.
Yeah, the language names are the same names of the ethnic groups. But sorry, these names are the names of the ethnic groups and the language groups of the biggest tribes, the most important tribes. Of course, there were smaller tribes that would adopt their language. And this is, by the way, in the book, there is one book here. It was written by one of these shamans from, I forgot the name of his tribe, but it's from here close to my region. And one thing they say there is that from the 600 ethnic groups all around the continent, all of them they all consider themselves as cousins, and some of them were brothers because they understand they were all from the Mother Nature. All of them. This is unanimous from all the ethnic groups in Brazil. They all see themselves as cousins related as a family due to Mother Nature. And this is,
Certainly.
yeah.
And I can tell you, referring back to my researches into native culture, this is the way that every culture felt. You know, in ancient Sweden, or in Denmark, which is a tiny little country, before Christianity, there were several tribes in Denmark. Did they fight? Yes.
Yeah.
Did they cooperate? Yes. Okay. And they consider themselves as cousins. They had certain boundaries, but they understood that we all are, everyone has the same mother,
Mother.
same divine mother. I have my mother, who was Italian, but I also have another mother. And that's the same mother that you have listening to me.
Yeah.
And they knew this. They didn't have an intellectual program. It was just obvious that they came from the land where they appeared.
Yeah.
They appeared in the land and they looked around and they said,
well,
this is Terra Madre.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is the motherland, right? The earth is the motherland.
Yeah.
So that's a very good point. Now, let me just try this. You can improve my Portuguese.
Your Portuguese. Go ahead.
Enso um animal perigoso.
Ok. Eu sou.
Enso,
Eu.
eu sou animal perigoso.
Nice.
Okay? This is how I introduce myself to you. And my name is the jaguar.
Jaguar. The narwhal thing.
Jaguar is the same word in Portuguese.
Yes. We have the local name for it, which for the jaguar, which is onça.
Onça.
Onça. So you have the onça pintada, ONCA, but C is it's a letter that you don't have in English. There is
Right.
it's a C with a little leg. Yeah, onça. That's it. We have also. I have here. My wife has here. At least like 20 onças in my house. Not mentioning my cats. I don't know where they are. I think they are sleeping. But I have 20 statues of onças here in my house.
Well, this is very appropriate. And let me say, I can assure you, as our conversations continue, these conversations signify that I am visiting Brazil. And I am visiting as a jaguar. So if anyone sees a jaguar, you're seeing me. And this is no joke, because I can do this. Why can I do this? How can I do this? Because I practice shamanism. So now I would like to talk about shamanism, and I would like to ask you, you see, when we start to build this picture with so little evidence of the culture and history and practices of the native people, they were shamanic people.
Yes.
And so we have to ask the question, well, what kind of practices did they have of shamanism, right? And there are several ways to answer that question, because what are the practices of shamanism? Well, the practices of shamanism are principally of three kinds, okay? One kind is that the shaman is a wizard or person who goes into the unknown, what's called the nahual or the nagual, okay? And they go to the supernatural. So the shaman can reach the supernatural and come back to the culture, society, because most people cannot reach the supernatural. You know why? Because it's too effing intense. It's too intense. And they don't have the physical force to take the impact of the supernatural.
Mhm.
It's as if you stood in front of an enormous waterfall, power of nature, and you look at it and you say, wow, it's so powerful. Imagine going and stepping into that waterfall. Most people do not have the ability to do this, but the shaman does. So the shaman goes to the supernatural and comes back with special knowledge. Second thing the shaman does is use sacred plants.
Yeah.
So each of these tribes that you're talking about used sacred plants. But what did they use? Did they use ayahuasca? Did they use rapé?
Mhm.
Right? I've used rapé.
Yeah.
I've used ayahuasca. Okay. Uh, it's very interesting because each tribe seems to have, existing today, for instance, seems to have its preferences toward a sacred plant.
Mhm.
And it also has its own particular ways of using that plant. So, for instance, there are tribes called the Shipibo who
Yeah.
use ayahuasca, and they use what is called tohe, which is datura. And there is another tribe
Datura.
that I happen to like a lot. I've never met this tribe, except you might say in kind of a trance experience,
All right.
you know, the Awanawa. Now, the Awanawa are a competing tribe to the Shipibo. And the Shipibo tend to be more aggressive and nasty, where the Awanawa tend to be more peaceful. Okay?
Yeah.
And this is reality. This exists today. This exists today in Colombia and Ecuador and Peru. So the Awanawa use rape and they produce it and they send it to the United States. So some people that I've met who've gone to South America and have met the Awanawa peoples, and the Awanawa people say, "Oh, here we use rape. It's a communal thing. They use rape to get like high, but
Mhm.
it's also a communal thing. It's not you get high and you go off on your own trip somewhere.
Have
You
some
know,
beer. Yeah.
yeah, it's a stimulant.
Yeah.
Rape. It's sort of like sniffing tobacco. In fact, tobacco is the main ingredient of it. Right? So
Right.
I've done rape. And then some tribes, the Jivaro, the Shipibo, whatever, they prefer to use ayahuasca. But the interesting thing is that they use it for different purposes, you know? Now, this plant called tohe is actually botanically defined as datura.
All right. I know the name.
And they use datura to kill,
I know
right?
that.
In fact, there was an occasion a few years ago, I have to laugh about this, where someone I met who was actually a Sicilian witch. You want to run into one of those bitches, okay? I met the Sicilian witch, right? Okay. You want to play around with me? Let's play. And she had been initiated by the Shipibo. And that practices that they taught her included killing magic using tohe,
Okay.
datura, which is a lethal plant. I have not used datura. I've collected it. I've extracted juices from it, but I
Mhm.
do not use it because it's extremely dangerous tool, and I don't know how to use it. But she tried to, it's called a golpe in Spanish,
Okay.
a strike, a
Oh.
golpe. Yeah, she tried a golpe on me with
Ah, okay. Now I see. The
I
Sicilian
think
the
this is
Sicilian
one of
witch.
this is this is one of the funniest things that ever happened to me.
Yeah.
What a joke. The poor woman is out of her mind to do that because the blowback of doing that to me is worse than trying to do it to me.
Okay.
You understand?
Yeah, I can see that. I've read
Yeah.
I've read the Castaneda books, so
Yeah.
I see what you mean.
Yeah. It's very Castaneda story.
Okay.
It's really a funny, I think it's a very funny story. So anyway, let's talk about,
The golpe was fun, you know.
yeah. And the third point of shamanism is that they do rituals. And as I pointed out in Not in His Image, and everyone needs to know this, the shaman is a special person, a man or woman in a community who commands the power of the supernatural, Don Juan,
Mhm.
in Castaneda, and who can use it to heal or to kill.
Yeah.
You are not a shaman if you cannot use it for both. And you can also use it to control the weather. All right?
All right.
Which there are many examples among my friends and people who've visited me about the weather around me behaves in particular.
Nice.
Right. So that's probably, if the people listening don't know so much about shamanism, those are the three things that qualify a shaman. You have to be qualified. You can't claim to be a shaman, a healer, unless you can do those three things.
Mhm.
And that is discipline. So let's talk about the use of psychoactive plants.
Yeah.
Now,
I have the couple of books, The Road to Eleusis,
right.
and there is a book here there is a guy that talks about mushrooms, Paul Stamets, I guess that's his name. I don't remember. So I got
Paul
some.
Stamets, yeah.
Paul Stamets, yeah,
He's a good authority, Paul
yeah,
Stamets.
yeah. I got two of his books and Gordon Watson, and a couple of two others about the subject. So let's do it. Ah, by the way, you mentioned something about that in that meeting, that famous meeting in Sweden on October 20th, 2019.
Yeah.
I remember you shared, I heard the audio, you shared about your experiences with the psychoactive plants.
Yeah, I'm nothing to hide. And it's not illegal, and I'm not a criminal, and I don't take drugs. I'm very much against drugs.
Mhm.
Cocaine, all the meth, all of that is horrible. No, I'm talking about sacred plants, psychoactive plants that have been used for thousands of years. So my question, Cesar, is there any evidence of what in the past or existing today may have been rituals of sacred plants in Brazil?
Yes, definitely.
Which plants?
Uh,
Ayahuasca?
Ayahuasca, we have in the north. There are tribes, I think, from Mato Grosso in the central Brazil. They use what we call jasco with J.
Just,
Jasco is hemp,
oh, okay.
and I believe, but we don't have the tradition, the mushroom tradition in Brazil. I'm not aware of, but more like these ayahuasca. There is another one, daime, the Santo Daime happens a lot here.
Yeah, well, that's a corrupt cult.
Yeah.
The 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 daime is a corrupt cult, which was created by someone from a rubber plantation in the 1930s. And be very careful about Santo Daime, which is the use of ayahuasca for Christian ritual.
Yes, Christian. There is a lot of Jesus.
Very bad news.
Yeah.
Very, very bad. Santo Daime is bad news.
Yeah.
Don't go there.
No, never. I was aware of that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a couple of, by the way, there's a book that may exist in Portuguese. I hope so. It certainly exists in Spanish. And this is an absolutely essential book. You see, the books you've cited, I've already read many times. I have a library on shamanism and sacred plants of about 85 books.
All right.
So you have Wasson, you have Schultes, you have Stamets, but these are all Westerners. They're not from South America. They're not from Central America.
Yeah.
So there is one key book, and it is one of the most beautiful books you will ever find, written by a South American named Cesar Calvo.
Okay. I heard about this guy, but I don't know.
Cesar Calvo, C-A-L-V-O.
Yeah.
And it is called The Three Halves. Get that. There's a half.
Three halves.
Three halves of Inomosho.
Yeah, Inomosho, George from America
That's right.
told me about it. Yeah.
That's right. Now, there are already 2 books about Inomosho. And Inomosho is like one of the most famous characters in the modern legend of Mexico-American shamanism and the Jibaro of Ecuador. So the story is that this man was German, I believe. He was a young man of German or European descent, and he was kidnapped by the Jibaro,
Okay.
who are headhunters of the upper Amazon, okay? And he turned out that he became a very high shaman named Inomosho. So there are 2 books in the background of Calvo's book, which are written by a man named Lamb, same as mine. I can't remember, E. Lamb or something. And they are about the wizard of the upper Amazon. This is the story of Inomosho.
Mm-hmm.
So there are 2 books about him, and then there is the book by Cesar Calvo, which is stupendous. Stupendous. It's on the level of Carlos Castaneda, but it's even better.
Nice.
So it's interesting that we have these recent books, but where are the studies and maybe some practices continuing today with ayahuasca and hemp in Brazil, but we know almost nothing about the practices of the native peoples, do we?
No, nothing. The material I have that talks about shamanism among the Yanomami is wonderful. It's written, I think I told you about it. It's written by a French, but it's like anthropology, sociological sciences, so, and it's translated into Portuguese. And there they explain with details that it's a kind of a sniff, it's like rapé. But that's the only register that I have read about these shamanic practices in South America. There is another one, that guy, the book is wonderful, but he's a little cautious. He doesn't go too deep into the shamanism, but they mention the teacher plants, but they don't go into that. The guy was not very bold to go there, but
it's a sad
Yeah.
and tragic situation that, as I said, I've looked over the evidence of native culture and practices in many countries, and it's a bad situation in Brazil.
Yeah.
They really wiped it out.
They destroyed all. And one thing interesting about peculiarity about Brazil is when they started colonizing, it all started in Bahia, more in the northeast of Brazil, and Rio de Janeiro, but Pernambuco, there were the French invasion, the Dutch, those Holandeses, the Dutch, they came here, they took a part of the territory where they developed the sugarcane thing. But when they started bringing the African slaves, the one interesting aspect here is that there were Muslim slaves, and because the Muslim tribes in Africa, African Muslims, they used to capture those people and sell to the other guys, to to those guys, and they used to bring them here, and you know the story. But among these people, there were the African religion issue, and they were Christianized, but the Muslim tribes, they wouldn't. So we have here, I have a book in front of me. So I change the camera. Ladinos e Crioulos. It's a very interesting book about the relation between these the mindset of the tribes. And there was big war here between these two tribes. And they, you know, the Christianized African individuals, they took over. Most of the Muslim tradition here was wiped. But the thing is, the Indians at this point were already decimated. It was like Central America. It was so quick, and we are talking about millions. And, you know, the Portuguese came here and they did a terrible work. And, of course, they didn't write anything. So everything they had was totally under the ground. Here in my city, I live in a city called, of course, a Christian saint name, São Bernardo. This is the name of my city. But the badge of the city, you know, you have in the flag, is Portuguese bandeirante, and on the other hand, the Indian, which is Tibiriçá, was the chief here in this region. And all you can go all the places in my area here. You can visit all the places. You don't see a trace of the indigenous culture. You go to the northeast. There is a place there called Natal. Rio Grande do Norte is in the corner of northeast of Brazil. The name of the people is called the name of the. If you are born there, your name is I forgot. It's the name of the local Indian tribe. But
Really?
if you are a tourist, you go there. All you see is the 18th, 19th century tradition, the Christian thing, and etc. You don't see. What you see is like a craftsman, you know, indigenous craftsmen. The rest wiped out. No history, no story, which is different. The history was wiped. The stories were wiped. Como é que chama o lugar? I forgot the name, man. They had a very peculiar language root. It doesn't belong to Tupi-Guarani. Anyway, I even forgot. Imagine the rest of the Brazilian people.
Imagine the rest.
They
We're really talking about
wiped.
a tremendous tragedy. It's a devastating tragedy.
Potiguar, that's the name. Wiped, and you know, beautiful culture, beautiful, you know, at least the craftsmen, you know, the miserable people that are left there, they have nice things, they do things, they have the cocar, you know, the feathers in the head, etc. That's all. They don't know about history, no names, no language, no nothing.
Well, I'd like to make, as we're coming around to the conclusion to this conversation, I'd like to make 2 points. The first point is a warning. I do not approve or I do not advise anyone to experiment with sacred plants. I have done it. I have studied it. But I do not support or advise or suggest that anyone do it. Okay? And also, I insist that drugs are this, drugs are drugs, and sacred plants are not drugs. Okay? So ayahuasca is not a drug. Psilocybe mushrooms are not drugs. Okay? So I have not done drugs in my life, but I have experimented with these sacred plants. And I'll be very honest with you. I've also encountered, you know, a fair number of other people who've experimented with them and I know about groups, and I know people who've gone to Peru to do ayahuasca. Some of them are close friends of mine. Some of them are associates. And I have to say that uh, it's not something that it's like mountain climbing. It's not something that everybody can handle. And so I do not recommend it. I do my best to be open and honest and talk about my experiences in shamanic states, which are called non-ordinary reality or paranormal. I've had a lot of those experiences, both with and without the sacred plants. And I attempt to, say what happened to me and what how I understand what happened to me, but I do not encourage anyone to do that. Make that clear?
Clear, totally.
So the other point is, I don't want to disappoint people, or I don't want to, like, I don't want the listeners to go away thinking, well, John, you're talking about something that's impossible. And what's the point anyway? It's impossible for us to retrieve our native roots because all the evidence of them has been destroyed. And even if we could, so what? There's an expression in English when you set someone up, to set someone up. I don't want to set up the people to be confused and disappointed, because I want to use these opportunities to talk to the people of Brazil and tell them that they can expect a visit from the jaguar. And this is no joke. I am not make-believe. I'm not making things up. One of the powers of a true shaman is to appear as an animal. You know that, right?
Yeah. I'm aware.
Yeah. And that animal is called the nahual, or as they say in Mexico, the nagual. And so a shaman, a true shaman, has principally one animal double. The definition for nahual is an animal double.
Yeah.
So as you look at me here, you see me in the virtual, you see a human being, an old guy, an old Irish Italian dude, and you see this human animal. But I'm not just this human animal. I can also be another animal at the same time. And this claim, you might say, John, it's crazy. Turn it off. We can't listen to this guy. I mean, but actually the claim I'm making is the claim that shamans have made all through time.
This is in the Yanomami book. They claim that.
I'm not making this up for my own purposes to impress you by how magical I am. I'm just telling you facts. These are the facts. And if I say I'm the jaguar, and you can call me the jaguar, is coming to Brazil, then you are going to see me in Brazil.
All right.
And someone is going to see me. And you might see me in the low standing grass, because that's what capoeira means, isn't it? It means low grass.
Okay.
The word capoeira means low grass, right?
All right.
So if you're driving down the road, or if you're out walking around, and you look over there, and you look over here, and it'll only be for an instant, you might see a jaguar.
All right. I'll be watching.
Be ready for that?
Yeah.
I've never spoken like this before, but I'm frustrated and exasperated because I didn't get to Brazil. I traveled around the world, but I didn't get there. And I wanted to go there many times, mainly for the women, to be honest.
Yeah.
But also for the music, for the dancing, for the festivals, you know,
Yeah.
and for the samba. You know, when I saw Black Orpheus, do you know that movie?
Yeah.
Black Orpheus?
Yeah.
When I saw that, I was 16 years old and I was blown away by the beauty of that film, filmed in Rio,
Mhm.
and the music, you know, Baden Powell. You know who
Baden
Baden?
Powell, yes, yes, I
I
have.
listened to Baden Powell for all my life. And so I have this attraction and this affection for
Nice.
Brazil. And I hope that I communicate it to you in these talks because I'm pretty crazy. You know, I'm pretty far out there, but I'm also just a simple human man. And I really feel something for the people who are listening to me. Believe me, I do.
Very nice. Brazil is a beautiful country. Of course, we have our issues, you know. Culture here has degenerated in the last, 20, 30 years. But we still can get the good feeling if you are in some places in Brazil, you still have the old atmosphere, especially out of the big cities. That's where I live.
Of course.
So yeah, that's it. It's a beautiful country, man. The parties, lots of Jesus everywhere. So every place you go, you see him somehow. We have syncretism. Uh, there is this everything that is related to Mother Goddess in Brazil has the direct connection to the Virgin Mother of the Yehudi baby. So Iemanjá is Nossa Senhora Aparecida. If you
Good.
look, Nossa Senhora Aparecida, Nossa Senhora. So a mother here, there is only one, and it comes from Palestine.
Yeah.
So
The mother from Palestine and the Virgin Mary is malware. That's what we
nowhere,
call
yeah,
it's malware.
yeah,
So, in anticipation to our next talk, I made some notes here and I thought
yeah.
I'd like to talk to you about something.
Let's see,
Okay.
let's see.
Would you say that in modern Brazilian culture,
Hmm.
for men, the male side of culture, I'd like to talk to the women too. Maybe I'll get around to that, sweethearts. But talk to the men. Is sport a big culture?
Brazil,
Soccer?
yeah, Brazil is big in sports, especially soccer. I love soccer, but of course, I understand what is behind that shit. But as a sport, as a collective thing, people playing as a team and blah, 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 I think it's beautiful. It's like, and I have to be honest, I'm happy with soccer because my team has been after the pandemic. my
Really?
team my team is sovereign here. So last week we have just won another cup, 10 cups in 3 years, John. So soccer is big here, believe me. Even
Okay.
I,
Well, maybe.
even your student loves soccer.
Okay. So maybe we'll see. We'll decide next time what we want to talk about.
But if you
But
want to talk about soccer, let's go. Manhood. You have a book about that, right?
I want to talk about manhood.
So let's go for manhood.
And maybe, maybe when I talk about manhood, I could talk about soccer. Maybe. So we'll see.
All right. Thank you very much, John. It was nice meeting you. Let's meet in 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks. Thank
Thank
you
you
so
very
much.
much. See you. Bye bye.
See you then.